Welcome! Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the global economy to look at the invisible rules that decide what you buy, how much you pay for it, and even where jobs get created. And to see just how powerful these rules are, we're going to start with a puzzle.
So, let's start with a real head-scratcher. It's a story about one of the most successful companies in the entire world and a market they just couldn't seem to crack.
I mean, really think about this for a second. For more than 3 decades, right up into the early 2000s, Toyota, a company famous for its quality and mind-blowing efficiency, was just losing money in Europe, year after year. How on earth is that possible for a company that was conquering the rest of the planet?
And believe me, they were conquering. Just to give you a little perspective, in 2004 alone, Toyota's global net income was over $11 billion. They weren't just profitable, they were the most profitable car company in the world. And yet, for decades, Europe was this financial black hole. It just doesn't add up, right?
Well, the answer had nothing to do with the quality of their cars. It wasn't their marketing, it wasn't their strategy. No, it was something they couldn't just engineer their way around, an invisible wall. Specifically, a really restrictive quota system that Europe and Japan had agreed to, which basically put a hard cap on how many cars Toyota could even ship there.
So to really understand these kinds of invisible walls, who builds them and why, we need to talk about the one global organization whose entire job is supposed to be tearing them down.
And that brings us to the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. You can think of it as the main referee for global trade. Its members make up more than 90% of all commerce on the planet, and its whole purpose is to make sure trade flows as smoothly and freely as possible.
Now, the WTO didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually grew out of an older agreement from 1947 called GATT. And for almost 50 years, countries went through these intense rounds of negotiations, slowly but surely chipping away at trade barriers, which eventually paved the way for the more powerful WTO we have today.
The absolute core idea, the bedrock of this whole system, is this principle of trade without discrimination. Basically, it means you can't play favorites. If you're a member and you give one country a special deal, like a lower tariff, you have to give that exact same deal to every other WTO member. Everyone gets treated equally.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a massive exception to that rule. What happens when countries decide to team up and form their own exclusive clubs, or as we're going to call them, their own economic neighborhoods?
This is what we call economic integration. It's when a group of countries, usually in the same region, get together and say, hey, let's create a special zone just for us. They agree to tear down the walls for each other, making it easier to trade goods and move money. But they keep those walls up for everyone else on the outside.
And these economic neighborhoods come in different flavors, depending on how serious the relationship is. You can start with a basic free trade area, which is like being casual friends. Or you can go all the way to a full-blown economic union, which is more like a marriage. You've got a single market, people can move freely to find work, and you might even share the same money. Each step gets you closer and closer together.
But here's the thing. Creating these special clubs isn't always a clear-cut win for the global economy. It actually creates two very different outcomes. One is fantastic for efficiency, but the other one, well, it's a little more complicated.
Okay, this is a really crucial idea to get. On the one hand, you get something called trade creation. This is great. It's when a country inside the bloc stops making something that's expensive to produce at home and instead buys it from a neighbor inside the bloc who can make it cheaper and better. Everybody wins, prices go down. But then you have trade diversion. This is where things get tricky. Let's say the most efficient car producer in the world is Japan. But because the UK is in a trade bloc with Germany, German cars become artificially cheaper thanks to the special rules. So the UK diverts its trade away from the most efficient global producer, Japan, to a less efficient regional partner, Germany. It helps a neighbor, for sure, but it might not be the smartest move for the global economy as a whole.
So keeping that in mind, let's do a quick tour of some of the most powerful economic neighborhoods on the planet.
And of course, we have to start with the big one, the heavyweight champion of them all, the European Union. It is by far the most deeply integrated trade bloc in the world.
The EU is so much more than just a trade deal. It's a genuine single market. That means goods, services, money, and even people can move between countries like France and Germany almost as easily as they can move between Florida and California. And when you throw a common currency, the euro, on top of all that, you've created an incredibly powerful economic force.
Now, let's hop across the Atlantic for a totally different model. NAFTA, the agreement that was designed to stitch together the economies of Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
So unlike the EU, NAFTA was a free trade area. It wasn't trying to create a single currency or let workers move freely across borders. Its main job was much simpler: get rid of the tariffs between the three countries. It also had these things called rules of origin, which are super important. It basically meant that for a product to get the zero tariff deal, you had to prove that a certain chunk of it was actually made in North America.
So what does all this look like in the real world? I mean, what's the actual impact? To see it in action, let's zoom in on what happened in Mexico right after NAFTA kicked in.
Okay, get this. Before NAFTA, if an American company wanted to sell goods in Mexico, they faced an average tax, or tariff, of about 10%. After NAFTA, that number plummeted to just 3%. Just like that, a huge barrier to doing business was practically gone.
And you can see that dramatic drop right here. A change like that doesn't just tweak the market, it blows the doors wide open. And one company in particular was standing right there, ready to charge through. You guessed it, Walmart. NAFTA basically created the perfect storm for them. Those lower tariffs meant they could import American products for way cheaper. The deal also made it easier to invest in building new stores, and it even pushed Mexico to improve its roads and shipping networks. And the result? By 2004, just a decade in, Walmart had become the single largest retailer in all of Mexico. That is the incredible power of these agreements.
And that really brings us to the big question to think about. These trade blocs are amazing at tearing down walls between their members, but they also keep up some pretty big walls with the rest of the world. So as we look to the future, you have to wonder, is this trend making our world more connected? Or are we just building bigger, more powerful economic fortresses?